Welcome everybody. Dawn Anderson Butcher here from Live Sports at Ohio State. So glad you're with us here at this lunch hour, right, on a Thursday. I am super excited today to have a couple people with me to talk about youth sport, community youth sport, and really it's the perfect time to have this webinar because we're kicking off the spring season. I just was at a meeting earlier this morning, and I had a dad talking to me about their son and their AAU and their spring baseball season kicking into gear and how excited it is to have the good spring weather. So at any rate, thanks for joining us. I'm here with Emily, not the goal, one of our doctoral students here at Ohio State. She's helping behind the scenes and will get us going logistically. And then I am so excited to have with me my co-host and partner in crime in organizing this, Randy Tevepaugh from Streetsboro City Schools up in our Northeast region. Hi, Randy.
Hello. Welcome,
Yes.
Dawn.
Glad you're here. One of our key members on our Coach Beyond State team, and also Randy's super involved in national work with the NIAAA and OIAAA, and just appreciate your leadership in the sport landscape, not just up in your region, but across Ohio and nationally. So psyched to have you. And then Randy pulled in his good friend, partner in crime in his office today. Are you in trouble? Ken, are you in trouble with the athletic
I like
director?
being in the head honcho's office. It's nice in here. I like it. It's nice and cool. I enjoy myself in it.
Awesome, awesome. Well, so we have Ken Carman here, right? Who's pretty much a celebrity, right? Up there with the 92.3, the Fan in Cleveland. And we are super stoked to have you and your incredible knowledge base around all things sports, right? Not just in that area, but
We'll find out by the end of the hour. I don't know if anybody, we'll see. I don't know if anybody's going to believe that by the end of the hour, but we'll see what we can do for you.
Well, the secret about these two too is they've coached collectively. How many years do you think you've coached collectively in the youth and school space? Maybe
25, perhaps.
Yeah, and then Ken, you too, probably the same
I
amount.
almost wanted to make the old Eddie Murphy Trading Places thing with Don Amici, that old joke where they were like, hey, together we've done 101 movies, because Don Amici had done 100 movies and Eddie Murphy had done one movie. He's done it to over 25. This will be altogether 5 years in, but obviously with the last 13 and stuff, I've gotten to know a lot of high school coaches of all sports. So there's a lot of interesting perspective that Randy's certainly been able to share, and a lot of the guys in Northeast Ohio and girls in Northeast Ohio have been able to share with me.
Yeah, so we're psyched to have you. All right, well, let me go over the goals for our discussion. Ken, Randy, and I have been planning this one for a couple weeks now, so we're psyched to get going. We have 3 priorities we want to hit on today with this Coach Beyond webinar. We want to sort of increase the awareness out there of like maybe some needs to recalibrate youth sport. And we're going to hone in on those according to like 3 different types of sport that we see out there: this developmental, recreational, and competitive levels, and talk about some of the growing issues in each of those, but then maybe some solutions or some things we as coaches need to think about as we move into the spring season. We'll be hitting on some priorities and strategies, right? Things that you can take away as coaches and use in your practice. And maybe some new ideas or things to think about as you broaden your awareness. And then at the end, we're going to be psyched to share with you a new resources that coming out here in Ohio that we're launching with our governor's office and the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and OSHA. So at any rate, we want to talk about that at the end. But without further ado, hey.
You want to go first? You want me to go first?
Go ahead, Ken.
Okay. Well, he's got a more extensive. I'll be quicker. My name's Ken Carman. I'm in the morning show host at 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland as well, and that's in the morning on the sports station in Cleveland. And I also anchor sports in the evening on WJW Fox 8 News in Cleveland as well. On TV, we have a show called Friday Night Touchdown that's been going on. We'll be going into season 29. I believe I've been a part of that over the last 7 years, working with some individuals. And over that time, I've got to know a lot of high school coaches as well, as I just mentioned to Dawn. we work very closely with the Cleveland Browns, Cleveland Guardians, Cleveland Cavaliers, obviously in so many ways as media outlets, but also all three have gotten very involved in youth sports, proud to say. And being the flagship home of the Cleveland Browns, got to work with them over a lot of things and got them involved with Streetsboro youth football. So over the last couple of years, I've coached my oldest son and now to be my youngest son. I got 3 boys. Moved to Streetsboro in 2019. So over that time, I didn't even think about the year that we had in North Ridgeville. We moved from North Ridgeville over to Streetsboro in 2019. So altogether, I've had about 6-7 years now of coaching little ones all the way up from T-ball through coach pitch through now they're 10U, so they're all throwing baseballs on their own right. Football from flag football a few years ago all the way up to tackle football now, going on with the 5th and 6th grade team. And this year I was made football director of the Streetsboro Junior Rockets football cheer and now comp, which is very exciting. And I'm very proud to say that we're also going to be getting a girls flag program off the ground coming up this summer. So I'm very excited about everything going on, but obviously it takes a lot of work. Never been the head coach, don't want to be the head coach just because of all my different things that I have to do. There's times where I am called away because of stories that happen. So I've had to leave practice in the middle of practice at times and head back up to the city. But other than that, it's my father was my coach when I was a kid. It becomes certainly a labor of love, and I'm very proud to be along with Randy today.
Junior Rockets, huh? Well, and the thing I love, Ken, that you bring to this conversation is like the knowledge and awareness of a lot of the different sport landscapes, right? And in your role, certainly in the coverage that you do, you see a lot of it, and I'm sure hear a lot of it. So I'm glad you're here. Thanks for being with us. Randy, yes, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Ken. Yeah, Ken's been a real great partner, by the way, to our high school program and middle school programs. We work collectively in getting some camera stuff at the middle schools, huddle cameras. So he's been a big beneficiary. We're the big beneficiary that he's involved. So in terms of youth sports, I started coaching youth sports when I was a sophomore in high school. I coached 3 summers Pee Wee. That's 7 and 8 year olds when I hit off the tee. Loved coaching at that point in time in my life as well. I was president of the Kenston Athletic Association for about 14 years. That's a role which oversees the Kenston School District youth programs. And we had about 12 different sports, boys and girls alike. And I was I got certified, a national certification through the National Administrators Association in West Palm Beach, Florida for youth sports. Professionally, well, I go back to high school. Football, basketball, and baseball guy. Did a little baseball in college, and then professionally, I coached Kenston High School baseball for 9 years as a head coach. I was an assistant coach in football and basketball for about 6 or 7 years as well. So I've got a long history. I coached all my kids in their sports as well as they were growing up. Had to leave coaching because I became an AD, and I've been an AD for about 19 years now. I enjoy what I do. I never go to work. I feel like I have this passion that just gets me here every day and keeps me going. And I truly love what I do. So yeah, that's about it.
Well, I mean, yeah, and that sort of understanding of all the different landscapes is one of the things that I love about you, Randy, right? That you really kind of have all that experience at the youth and at the interscholastic sport, and now sort of it's the AD overseeing a lot of what's going on now as we change the landscape together. So, hey, I'm reminded, I forgot to say, I used to coach a lot of competitive soccer. I played college soccer, and I coached competitive soccer, and then both my boys, I was their youth soccer coach in the recreational setting. And then I coached high school varsity soccer when I was working on my doctorate out at Utah. So yeah, together we might have, Ken, 130 years, 31 years. I don't know. Yeah. So nonetheless, let's get going. So hey, to move to this next, I'm going to do a little bit of talking real quick just to give us a foundation. As we move through this webinar, we're going to talk a little bit about each of these types of sports that are going on here, and that we want to kind of describe the strengths, talk about some of the issues, and maybe give some advice and practices for coaches as they move forward. Before I do that, though, I want to give everybody a stat that I think is pretty important. If you didn't know, well, in the United States, about 35% of youth, right, discontinue their sport participation each year, regardless of the level of sport that they're in. And so it's really important, from a public health priority, from a continued engagement and physical activity priority. When we think about all the benefits of sport participation in terms of life skills that are learned on and off the court, or health and mental health benefits, keeping kids in the game becomes an important priority. And thinking about developmentally and recreationally and competitively, these different kinds of sport systems can be really important. So at any rate, when we get going here, we're going to talk about three things. So developmental sport, right? Often thought about the little young people, right? This is where we have sport that's, teaching the skills, right? Promoting fun and physical activity and really positive experiences with friends, right? In order for kids to learn the techniques that then they can use, right, in a more structured play game-like situation, okay? Developmental. The other kind of midpoint here is recreational. And just by the way, recreational sport is the one that we don't necessarily always see enough of. However, it was interesting. I was at Denison College. I was at Denison University yesterday, and they have 26 varsity sports, right? But then they have this massive intramural sports program at Denison. I think there's 20, 30 different teams. And again, that's intramurals is recreational at the collegiate level, right? So primarily designed for fun, social interaction, positive pro-social peers, spending time, and then usually low pressure participation. And we're seeing elements of competition getting into this stuff, but again, that's not the primary purpose of intramurals and recreational. So the last one, right, is what we're moving more and more to, and is becoming sort of this uber focus in sport with kids today that we want to be mindful of, and I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. This is that competitive, structured sport. Oftentimes there's tryouts. It's focused on performance. Elite performance, winning, and pretty intense training. And as we'll talk a little bit more later, is this almost getting too much focused on all the different ways we can train athletes to excel, oftentimes in maybe just one or two sports. So before we go into the discussion with Ken and Randy, though, I want to share some research findings that myself and Dr. Samantha Bates, one of our other Coach Beyond Life Sports faculty members, have done nationally. We did a study 2 years ago now where we surveyed over 12,000 coaches across the country in the United States. And they were all different levels. They were competitive, recreation, school-based, community-based. And what we did in this survey, we had a lot of different things we asked, but in this particular section of the survey, we asked coaches to order the top priorities that they had for their coaching, right? Regardless of what level they were coaching, but what's driving their coaching practices. And in sport pedagogy, we talk about this as like your top philosophy. What are your values as a coach? What's your philosophy you bring to the game? And we ranked order. We had these listed. They were things like teach the sport, develop young people, win games, continue participating in my sport, give back to my community, be a role model, all of those things, both sport-specific ones and then more sort of general youth development ones. So these data here, though, guys, right, what this does is it ranks the percentage of those coaches nationally who ranked win games in their top 5 priorities driving their coaching practices. And so what we see here, which is phenomenal, is that our coaches of 5 to 10-year-olds in the United States, 77% of them, one of the primary motivators and ways in which they approach their coaching with 5 to 10-year-olds is to win the game, right? But what we know too, right, is that it should be focused on skill development, right? Fun, learning, right? Engaging in physical activity. So This chart right here, I always say is backwards. And what it should look like is this. And Emily's going to show us here when she hits the thing. We really should be focusing on winning much later because 60 to 70% of kids drop out of sport by age 12 in the United States. I already told you the data about 35% every year not signing back up, right? So we've got to begin thinking about this developmental pathway, not just in kids' age and maturation, but in the way our sport system's structured from developmental to recreation to competitive. So that's what we're going into today. And I'm excited to be here with Ken and Randy to do that. So, all right, let's do developmental sport, right? And talk a little bit about this. So, hey, what do you all think about these data, what we should be doing in developmental sport?
Well, from
You
my
know,
standpoint, I mean, when you're getting to 77% of those numbers, I think it really troubles me about winning, especially when you start out with little kids. There's plenty of different philosophies that I think for it, but in terms of one of the things that I wanted to do when we got here with, and again, it's my son wanted to play football. As long as he wants to play football, I'll remain involved. And we have been blessed by having good neighbors, good people in the community. And our president and our board are fantastic people. And I think that we've had not groupthink, but you've had people with the same goal where winning isn't the priority. And one of the first things that we wanted to do was meet with Randy, work hand in hand, work with the coaching staff from the football program here at the high school. And what's really important, because for me, a good community, especially in the state of Ohio, does get ran by high school football. And so what's going to keep a kid who starts playing youth football, flag football at the age of 5, what's going to continue to make him want to play all the way up until a Friday night over here at the high school stadium? I think a lot of that has to do with fun. I think a lot of that has to do with participation, fun, playing within a structure of, yeah, we'd like to win. It might be fun to win, but it's not the end all be all of that. And I think that in so many ways that priority, maybe because of different things that we watch, social media, different things that we fall under pressure of, I think that tends to be a driver for so many. And that's, I think, where we lead into some pitfalls.
I love that in Streetsboro, how you really have even thought about like from a youth to the high school Friday night, how it moves through from developmental to, to then this competitive over time, right? And that it really begins in a community as you think about that channel. So that's awesome. I love how that's partnered. Randy, what about you? What do you think about this developmental space? What should we be focusing on? I heard fun, right? I heard learning the skills.
Well, I think the real point here is, why are kids leaving at age 12? And typically it's because they had a bad experience. It's not because of the sport. It's because of something was said to them, how somebody made them feel. And we're talking about 5-year-olds to 10-year-olds. I mean, these kids need support. They need to have fun, and it has to be a good experience. Even at the high school level, we can't promise our kids that play sports that they're going to win championships, but we can do the best we can as a coaching staff, administration, to make sure they have a good experience. That good experience isn't always winning. It's about team dinners. It's about what they do on the bus to a game. Some of those things that they will remember when they look back on high school and things of that nature. But I think we have to keep perspective on that goal, is making it fun for kids so they come back, so they want to play the next year. And that top-down philosophy, in other words, our head coaches at the high school are very much involved with our middle school and our youth. And the reason is that they can guide those programs, keep kids in the programs as much as possible. Now, there's going to be some transitions into other sports and other hobbies as they grow. But for the most part, if we keep the kids involved, they're going to have a good experience, but it has to be overseen by people that are reasonable, people that know what it takes to keep kids involved. And that also includes parents. I mean, the ride home from a game, yeah, your coach doesn't know what he's doing. That kind of stuff is very negative, and it's not something that the kids don't want to necessarily hear about, because they may like their coach, right? So I think the important thing is to keep perspective on making it a great experience for kids at all levels.
Yeah. Let's go back to the, coaches of 5 to 10-year-olds though, right? So remember, 77% saying win games. So in the research, it's pretty clear that the one of the top predictors of coming back again, signing back up, and also kids' motivation when they're there, right? And what coaches can do mostly is focus on improvement. And what we call that is mastery, mastery oriented climate. And so this is this idea of like, hey, I used to be able to, when I did my free throws from the line and I used to get, 2 out of 10. And with practice and effort, right now I'm on average getting 5 out of 10. And look at how my work effort and over time and my practice the correct technique has gotten me to be more successful at making those hoops, right? And then what that confidence brings to a young person, right, for themselves internally, but then also when others are recognizing that improvement internally, right, as opposed to like, hey, great goal you had, right? Because you can have a great goal and not have really ever learned anything or done anything, right? I think that mastery piece is another important part. So if you all were to break this down and like you were starting a spring league right now and you had a developmental, you were coaching in a developmental league, how would you coach it? Talk to me about what you as like a parent volunteer coach would do specifically
How
with
would I
those
or
little
how would
guys.
Randy?
Either. Well, who wants it? You want it, Ken?
Well, because I kind of what I again wanted to do, and what's made them so special about it, and all communities are different. It's one thing you can have a youth night at a football stadium, and that's about it. But it's about these are professionals in so many ways that are about when you get to high school, there's so many different distractions. We have boyfriends, girlfriends, we have other extracurricular activities, we have family obligations, we have jobs. And so there's a lot of different things. And what I think that we fall into the pitfalls of is again the competition between fathers, between neighbors, between our memories of what it was. And I think so many times, what I think I want to stop with is I call it cosplaying being a coach, because we love football. We're fans of football. I use football as I always use it as the example here. I know plenty of people coach other sports, and I love them, but we remember what our coach was like 20 years ago when we played high school football. Well, things have changed. Certainly, they've changed. We watch movies. We think of football coaches as Al Pacino and John Voight and things of that. Craig T. Nelson. It's not like that. And what helps me, and what has really been a big help, is like, okay, I know actual coaches. Who are the actual coaches that I've known beforehand? Well, I knew Browns coaches. I've known coaches from other NFL football teams and college football teams. Okay, that's high level stuff where it actually does count, whether you win or lose. What's it like in high school? What are people like who have to deal with not just getting a kid to be able to start from point A and get him to point D by the end of the season, but also everything else and keeping him involved? And so it's about talking to the high school program coaches and knowing not just what they want in X's and O's, but what they want from us in terms of helping that young man to continue to want to play sports and continue to want to be a part of the sporting community, because it makes them a better part of the community as well. And I think that we've all found out, at least on my staff, winning is not in the top 5. It's not in the top 5. It's about what can we do to help them out, to help out the program, and to make everybody better. And I so far, and it's still early in the process, so good.
Yeah, I like the comment about like it's the competition between dads or the competition between neighbors and the adults, right? That are it's more it's this competition maybe that's being built up from past memories, like you said, that adults bring to youth sport that takes it away from the kids and sometimes trivializes the learning and the mastery and the fun and the participation and the growth mindset. Yeah. For
And
the kids.
I'll tell you this, Don, just doing what I do. I've had guys after games, coaches approach after games and go, "You going to talk about that on Monday?" After we lose a game. So it's hard not to get competitive about this sort of thing, because it's like, but again, if the
Yeah.
kids are happy, I mean, you find out they still want to go to Dairy Queen afterwards, so it doesn't really matter,
Mhm.
win or lose. So I think that
Yeah.
if we keep that in the priority, it's about finding the right people who usually want to listen to the high school coaches and help the high school coaches instead of waiting around to blame them, I think, in so many ways.
Yeah, yeah. And I help the high school and sort of the developmental feeder pattern. But at the end of the day, at the youth level, we're developing young people, right? And we're teaching the skill and the sport, and that's super important to do well, right? And my Jerry Davis on our team, he always says his number one. By the way, Jerry Davis had those. If anybody knows him out there, he's in the athletic department here at Ohio State, and he was coaching his son, Brendan's basketball team, and they went like 0-11 or something, right? But Jerry swore that, and they all got better. They had a blast, and every single one of them signed up the next year to play for Jerry again, right? And so that's his like proudest moment as a sport-based youth development leader in our state. So Randy, tell us your perspective on the developmental sport context. Try to stay out of the competitive high school and things. We'll get to that next. But at the youth, the younger ages, the developmental level, let's hear what you think. Maybe even talk about parents, right, as coaches.
Well, I think from the parent perspective, that has changed incredibly over the years. Parents didn't used to go and talk to coaches about playing time and things of that nature 30 years ago. In fact, most of the coaches then were teachers, whereas now 70% of our high school coaches, head coaches, are not teachers, are not in education, are not in the buildings. So it's changed the landscape a lot from that perspective. And parents are more proactive in getting involved now with coaching, with the whole dynamics. And that's not a bad thing if it's done in a positive way. Our coaches have become more about building relationships within the community with people like Ken and the people that are running our youth programs to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I'm not just talking about the X's and O's that are running the same type of offense. I'm talking about the philosophy, positivity, the sportsmanship side of things. So our head coaches have a bigger responsibility throughout the community than they did in the past, where it was they go to practice, they go home. There's no cell phones. Parents aren't calling me at night. Where our coaches
Right.
are getting phone calls throughout the days, as Ken mentioned, sometimes it's immediately after the game. And it could have been after a loss. Either way, we have this 24-hour rule that you shouldn't be contacting coaches within 24 hours after an event, just to let things. And usually that cools down the emotions a little bit of the parents or whoever's going to call. So in terms of developmental with
Yeah. Hey, and Randy, the other thing too is parents, right? We're in the car with the kid going over what we want to say to the coach, right? And so like it's also a great role for parents to say, you don't need to talk to your kid about the game and break down everything right away, right? Like just be like, hey, great to watch you play. Loved seeing the competition on the field, right? Wow, your team's getting so much better. And then maybe in 24 hours, then you start saying, hey, I was thinking about this part of your game and I wonder how, right? So sorry to interrupt you there, but yeah, we got parents calling coaches, but those same parents are all over their kids, right? Which is
it's that ride home after the game, and that's usually more with the youth kids, the younger kids, where I can't believe your coach did this or that or the other. And again, you got to change that whole mindset to be more positive. You guys did great today, even though you lost. You did better than you did last week. Just keeping it in a positive line, keeping it supportive of their child is critical, because the more negativity they hear, the more likely they're going to be dropping out. They're going to be part of that 77% that leave by the time they're 12. So parents play a pretty significant role in supporting their kids in a positive way and not necessarily talking negatively about the coaches. So.
Yeah, I love that. Any other thoughts about developmental sport before we're going to move into more competitive? And I can't wait to break down some of these more the bigger picture issues that are going on in that space, both in the school interscholastic space and in our clubs and travel programs. Any other thoughts for coaching the young ones?
Going with what Randy mentioned, how it seems to happen more with some of the youth programs. I think you might have mentioned it as well, Don, the parents thing. It does make it a little bit difficult because there is all right, Pete Thompson's our head coach. Pete Thompson's pictures is in the brochures and the programs and things like that on a Friday night, and he's got a track record of success. Well, I mean, Kenny Carman's a loudmouth on the radio, and I got a job just like him. So if there's a problem, there might be somebody emboldened to say these things. But that's part of the thing where I think that communication with parents is a key, and active communication. Okay, why you want my son to play center? Why do you want my son to play center? What's the reason? And then you get to show that off. And then there's also at the end of every practice and at the end of every day, there's like almost a mental checklist that I like to go through. Is what did you do to retain kids today? What did you do to make it fun? What did you do to retain them today? What do we do to connect? Because I think that that's really one of the more important things that, again, working hand in hand with Randy, is that my kids do other things other than play football.
Right.
And so I have to be at these extracurricular activities. So if I see Gavin, I know that his friend Gavin also likes baseball. I know that he likes basketball. I know that they play video games together, and I understand what his favorite TV show is because I ask these things during practice, during downtimes, during warm-ups, things like that. Knowing what they go through in school, knowing that they're in the same class or they were in class last year, they're not in class this year, because I think that it forms a connection there other than football. I want you to be here, and this is why you're here, and this is why you shouldn't be doing what you're doing or doing what you're doing. I think that that's very important to take an interest in not just the winning side of that, but to also connect personally with the kids.
Man, Ken, so much packed into that. I love this idea of that checklist, like as a youth coach, right? Like, what did I do to retain kids to make them want to come back for the next practice, right? Or for next, right? What did I do to connect with the kid, to learn about his favorite TV show, or, how he's doing in school, or, what did I do to find out other interests that he had, or give him specific feedback about, cues that he can take with them to practice, and get better at so that he can perform his craft. So awesome way to think about that from a checklist perspective. And it's not just about, did you become a better dribbler today, or did you master that, special move, that corber in soccer or whatever. So really very cool. I love that. All right, let's move into competitive. Okay, so we're moving here. We went from developmental, now we're talking about competitive now. So this, this involves Randy, this is you, right? I mean, in some ways, high school sports, becoming more and more competitive. We definitely are seeing this, the pressure that student athletes have to, to perform, and the fan behavior, the challenges with refs and keeping refs in Ohio, because it's gotten so competitive that sometimes it makes it really hard to even just have fun at all. So I'm going to tackle a couple different parts of this. So one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is kids playing just one sport, right, at these competitive levels. And so soccer year round. As soon as high school basketball season's over, you're in AAU, and you get AAU, then high school ball in Ohio, it's in the summer of June. You can tackle that, and then we've got kids playing again in the spring. And what we know too is that, like, the international national governing bodies actually recommend that kids don't specialize in sport until about 14 because of the burnout, right? And injury, right? Preventing, injuries, and also just, the benefits of being involved in different kinds of activities, right? And the transfer of like skills and tactics and strategy you learn maybe in basketball, and how it's useful in other sports like lacrosse or whatnot. So talk to us a little bit about your ideas around specialization and what you're seeing out there in the field. I'd love to learn a little bit more.
Well, let me talk about specialization real quick too. And I think Ken would agree with this. Most higher level college coaches want multi-sport athletes, for a number of reasons. The injury factor that you mentioned, Don, is one of them. You establish a muscle memory system if you're only playing soccer, so you don't have those skills that a multi-sport athlete would have in terms of being able to do more. So that's one of the factors. There's a lot of specialization because of individual instruction. Individual instruction in baseball, I take baseball for example. You don't get it so much in football unless you're a skilled player. But baseball, there's pitching instruction, hitting instruction, catching instruction. There's instruction for infielders. That's you can get private lessons all year long, and people are investing a lot of money, and that's okay. But you have to keep it in perspective, right? You know, you know, at some point in time, another factor is going to be something that the high school coaches are going to have to deal with is NIL. Right now, NIL is in 37 states. It's coming to Ohio. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And I know Doug Ute and his board and the staff at the OHSAA are very proactive in preparing for that situation to occur because it's going to at some point in time, right? So again, 1% of our athletes are going to go on to play in college. So what is specialization really going to do for you except make you better at what you do while you're in high school? If you're one of those elite athletes, you know, and you're getting specialized training, that's good. You're going to benefit from that, obviously. Everybody will benefit from that because usually those instructors are pretty knowledgeable that are doing those kind of programs. So it's challenging for high school students because they have some coaches that, and we're very fortunate here at Streetsboro because we share athletes. Our coaches, we have some wonderful coaches that understand that we're not big enough to tell our best athlete only play football, only play basketball or baseball. We need to share. And they're real good about that in the summer too, because they're all holding their camps and things of that nature, right? And we also got to take in consideration the social aspect and some downtime for these athletes because they don't get many, especially if they're 3-sport athletes.
Right.
So yeah, those are some of the kind of concerns I have with kids specializing at any age. You know, the injury factor plus the fact that they're really limiting themselves and from the head coaches in the college level perspective in terms of being more versatile.
Yeah, and especially that stat you gave, because you know, only 1 to 3% will go on and play collegiate, right? And that may even be without any money or without any scholarship, and you know, at a small D3 or something, which you know is still a great learning experience and an opportunity to play, but and to continue, right, in your sport for longer. But of that 1 to 3 that play in college, only about 0.1 go on to the pros, right? So I think a lot of our parents, you know, and young people have some dreams that, you know, aren't necessarily realistic. They hope they're that special one, right? So, yeah.
You know what, Don, you mentioned the shortage of officials too. And again, that's where Ohio, under Doug Ute's leadership, has done an excellent job. They've initiated a Respect the Game program, and it's caught fire across the state of Ohio. People are doing some really special things to recognize the officials. We have in each sports season, we have a week of recognizing the officials, and I think that's really caught on. And you know, the hope is that we can keep officials and that the spectators realize the damage they do. And it really is going to impact our student athletes when we don't have officials for a freshman game or a JV game because they all quit, you know, at an early age. So.
Right. You know, it's been fun to watch districts create like handbooks and playbooks right around culture and like you said earlier, like sportsmanship and our sport. This is what our values are as an athletic department, right? And how does it align even further to our school values and expectations, right? Not just for our student athletes, but for our parents and spectators and fans. And there's a lot of work we can do there, right, in that space, especially given some of the challenges we're seeing because of the high level of competitiveness and will to win in these spaces. So, yeah. So, hey, Ken, talk to us a little bit about this, you know, the perspective of the community around the competitive sport perspective, right? You know, like I think as a community member and as somebody who's in that sort of feeder up to maybe the Streetsboro, you know, high school football team, what do you think the community can do to help reduce some of the pressures that our student athletes feel in these spaces?
Well, I mean, gosh, that's a multi-pronged question, because
Sorry.
no, I mean, because, I go back to what Randy said. I mean, Randy mentioned the operative word, and I think that things are changing. I don't know if I can say for the better, but I think things are changing as the 2020s roll on, because he mentioned money. And I don't think it's as much as you think Junior's going to go to the pros. I think it's more of I've invested $1,250 for my kid to play soccer, travel soccer, or baseball, or whatever it is. I've heard of several families where you got two sons who might be playing some version of competitive sports, and one's paying $1,500, the other one's paying $800. I mean, that's over $2,000 as it is. Then you rope in the actual travel to it, hotels, things like that. And I think it's also where you look at it and go, where's the return on the investment? You might not say that out loud because you don't feel right saying that out loud as a parent. No one wants to say that out loud, but it's somewhere in the back of the head. And that investment, you want a return on it. And the psychology of that is winning. And so when we talk about specialization, my son's a second baseman. He'll be second base. They're going to put him at second base. But then again, by the time you're 14, the pressure of paying off that investment, the pressure of always winning starts to take its toll. I think that when we say we advocate for playing multiple sports, I think a lot of people underneath the high school level, unfortunately, I think a lot of people say it because I think that's something they think people want to hear. And I think that if you want to play multiple sports, well, they'll play multiple sports, but when it comes to football, you guys are going to play football. And then we'll have our 7-on-7s, and then we'll have our off-season workouts, and we'll do things like this. And remember, they're only 10 years old. So that makes me nervous because I am of the generation where, again, football is very important here in Northeast Ohio. No, the state of Ohio in general. I mean, my goodness, you're in Columbus. We all know how important football is to this state. Exactly. And I grew up with guys whose parents, whose dads were in the record books. And by the time they got to be about 15 years old, they were done with it. Absolutely done with it. But when you mention community, I think it's the, again, understanding of what a coach goes through, of what a coach goes through to try to not just win, but again, raise people the right way, bring them up the right way so they go on and become good people. Understanding can be a very difficult thing. And that's what makes jobs like Randy's and the coach's job so difficult because there's pressure to win because especially with the sport of football.
Because we need a return on our investment.
Exactly. So what does football do? Football passes levies. It's harder and harder to pass levies. And you see a lot of places, and it's been this way. I'm from Stark County, Ohio. And football is obviously the main thing there. And passing a levy in so many ways has a lot to do with what your record is going this fall and how good things are going into November. So there is so much pressure on that, but I think people become so results based, they lose what the process is. You know, real quick, I'll share this. You know, I'm a big Nick Saban guy, big Saban disciple. It's easy to be a Nick Saban disciple, so I'm not breaking any ground here. He loves to tell this story of 2002. They come off a really good year, 2002. They go down to Kentucky. They win on a Hail Mary pass, and the only person upset about it is Nick Saban because they didn't dedicate themselves to the process. So he knew the next week they were going to go out and get throttled, and they got throttled. They lost by 30, I think, to Alabama. And this is highly competitive. He's making millions of dollars already at LSU. And I think that we become so results-based, we forget how to get to the win. And process is about the win. And they don't realize that winning isn't the end-all be-all to get that actual win. If that makes any sense, you have to fall in love with the day-to-day work of building somebody up to get what you want.
Right. And the process may be in an end of itself, right? Like, because I think about where I'm the family, right? We would travel for competitive soccer to San Diego, right? And my son's team would play like the team that we play all the time from Indiana. It was like, why the hell are where are we going all the way to San Diego to play this team from Indiana? And, you know, it's that, you know, return this, well, we have to put forth the money. We have to, you know, and then you're out there, you're like, well, we better beat them. We better win. But the process of the work to get entered into that tournament, or the celebration that should come with that, or the process of being as a team or a family or community going there, and the time as a unit, right, is important. Hey, so, yeah.
You see the pressure on parents when it comes to that, because that in turn becomes the competition. Well, you don't want to spend the $1,200. Why? Do you not love your kid as much as I love my kid? Then people, I mean, moms are on Facebook. It becomes, I mean, social media becomes a nasty competition for a lot of people.
Right.
And I think that raises that pressure on them. And then I think I have no problem with competitive sports, or trying to be competitive and trying to win. It's nice. It's great memory. It's great memory.
Mhm.
But I think we also have to remember, who are we trying to win for? Are we trying to win for ourselves to pay off that investment, or are we actually trying to win because, hey, you know what? We just happen to have a good baseball team here. Let's go out and do it. Like my son, they won a championship in baseball last year. I was so happy for him that he was able to do that he was a part of a great team to do that. But I also know that in so many other cases around the country, it's not necessarily like that. And so I felt blessed to be a part of that team last year and to see that. But I also know that so many places don't really share that type of goal.
Yeah. Well, and what we know is if we just focus on the winning, it's not enough, right? Because, if we've got to focus on the learning and development, and then what to become a competitive or to be an elite athlete, it's hard work, it's discipline, it's structure, it's good coaching, it's tenacity, it's taking risk, right? When you're learning a new skill, or you're trying to develop a different part of your game, and that's the part, right, that we should be celebrating, right? And then that is what you're going to take with you when you go into careers, and you're out of the game eventually, in the end. Yeah, Randy, go ahead. And then I got a question that I want to ask from the chat.
Yeah. I just want to piggyback on what Ken was referring to in terms of the community. So Streetsboro's community is super supportive of our school district, our athletics, and everything else. But having said that, I think it would be common for most communities to know that their football team was ranked 5th in the state and won the championship, but they don't. I wonder what percentage knows about the academic standing of their school district. So that's where that emphasis is really. I mean, it's out of line, but it's reality as well, right? So
Yeah. So what do we value as a community, right? So we value the winning of the football team more than our all of our kids. For example, in Ohio, I think it's like, I don't know, like 47% of kids in the state are not on grade level for literacy, right? We're not complaining about that. We're complaining about Friday Night Lights, right? So it's a fascinating values question for our community and society. So thank you both for hitting on that. So hey, so I have a question out here from Chad, right? And it sounds like he's with Westlake football, maybe. I don't know where that is exactly in Ohio, but he asked, they've had to suspend over 30 people last football season for youth football grades 1 to 6. So 1st to 6th graders, they've had to suspend over 30 parents or spectators, not kids, parents and spectators. So, what ideas do you all have for them as a sport organization, or for the coaches, to how to curtail that, prevent it, or what the heck to do now that you have that problem to get a hold of it and control of it?
I think my first question would be to ask Randy. Because it's really competitive in high school. So what do you do to make sure everybody's behaved at an event in high school that we could borrow?
Yeah, Randy, this is you. These are parents. These are 1st graders and through 6th graders. What do you think, Randy?
No community is immune from this. It's the excitement sometimes of the situations. It's if they thought their child got hurt and somebody didn't do something about it. So the emotions, athletics is very emotional, and it has very little to do with winning and losing. It's about what's going on, and that's why we have an official issue right now too with our officials. But we have to be creative. One of the things we did in our league, we developed a policy about spectator conduct, and we did incremental disciplinary action. And we made sure we posted on our website, and everybody got a copy of it. It's in final forms. But we hold to it as well. It's not, that's just Joe. He does it all the time. That doesn't fly anymore. Joe's gone. If the official looks at me and says, this guy in the red jacket's got to go, I walk over, escort him out.
Right.
They have to, the folks that are there have to believe that there's going to be consequences. Because if we're light on how we handle those kind of things, and it's embarrassing. And the sad part, it's embarrassing to their student and their student athletes that are on the floor watching mom and dad get escorted out of the gym. And everybody's looking at them. They know that's their parents. That's really the dark side of that kind of behavior. But I think what they're doing in Westlake, you know what? If you have to kick out 50, you kick out 50. You keep that going and have escalated consequences too. Not just, oh, you can't come again, or today you're out. If you get kicked out again, you're not coming back the rest of the year. And you have, if you have to have police at your programs, you got to do that. So
yeah,
we've had situations where we've had to tell them that they're going, if they come back onto the school district property, they're going to get arrested for trespassing, and we coordinate that with the police department. So
but I liked your part. But I love your part about like, what's the policy, right? Clearly articulated in writing. And then, at Life Sports at Ohio State, like we make sure all of our parents, they have to go through, or an adult that's representing each youth in our program, has to go through an orientation where we go through the specific policies. Like your child will give one warning, the next step will be this, we will give you a call, then this, or if it's these things, this will be the more advanced kind of consequence that might happen. And then we as leaders have to hold those expectations, right? And behaviors clear in our policy, and then be willing to go through with the consequences. And I would say, Randy, I'm sure in your case, I hope that like your superintendent or your principal is like, yes, Randy, I support you when you kick those parents out, right? And so we as leaders have to support our coaches and our officials and our administrators when they have to make those hard choices when we're dealing with those kinds of behaviors.
It's uncomfortable for everybody involved. Everybody in the gym feels it. Even if you don't know the people, you say, oh, geez, that guy's acting like that. And it's just disruptive to the whole process.
Yeah, well, so yeah, that's great. I love that. So thanks for those insights, Randy. And I think definitely in the school space, there's a little bit more I don't know, control that you might have because of the policy oversight of the LEA, but definitely important. So I want to ask one more question of you all, and then we'll have a few more minutes for wrap up and a couple questions. So that we didn't get to talk a lot about recreational sports. So if we think about one of the reasons why kids stop playing, for example, like basketball, is they play through the recreational league or the developmental. They play some recreation. They get to middle school. They try out for the school team and they don't make it, right? And then there's not an alternative recreation program necessarily in our communities for those kiddos that maybe aren't at that highest tier level of skill, right? Whereas the other part of that is the maturation component, right? Like, some kids develop earlier than others. Some kids maybe don't start school till later, or start school earlier and aren't as far along in their age maturation. And so, what do we do as a community to get recreational sport back out there, right? Like even in our communities, in some of our communities where we have a lot of poverty, right? There aren't leagues, there aren't facilities, there aren't parks, there aren't there's transportation barriers. Do you all have any ideas about how we can bring back more recreational sport? Because the value of it is continued play, fun, socialization, friendships, positive activities in the out of school time that keep kids engaged in life and, meaning, right? What do you got for me?
I think it comes down to people being interested in the alternative. I think in so many ways, once the toothpaste is out of the bottle, it's kind of hard to get back in. And so it's kind of, there has to be a dedication to it. So like growing up, and I'm not young anymore, but I'm not too old. There was always like church league basketball, midnight church league basketball, which was usually there to keep youth out of trouble on a Friday night. Great, a great concept. But I also think that, there's so many folks who, again, because of the competition between parents. If we're not here to win, what are we here for? And I think that kind of takes away from it. My son likes baseball. It's not his number one, and so he does not practice it the way other ones would. So he's more interested in the rec side of things, just going out there and hanging out with his buddies and having fun in the summertime, because I really don't want him to only want to do one sport. And so if he wants to, I'm not going to force him to play a sport. I'd like there to be an alternative, and thank goodness we have one. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it comes down to individuals who might be dedicated to providing that opportunity, and then obviously finding people who really want, kids who really want to do it, and providing them that type of atmosphere to make them want to come back. Again, the asking yourself, what do we do to connect? What do we do to retain at the end of a night driving home, instead of what do we do to actually win a game coming up, I think is one of the bigger things to concentrate.
Well, and I also think too, like one of the things too is like we also sort of take recreational sport and make it more competitive, or like traditional organize a sport where it could be like, hey, we have a soccer club, right, or soccer program that meets every Tuesday, and anyone comes and we break you up in teams and we drill and we play 3-on-3s, and it's just every, stay after school a little while, or me, so that I think we do. I have a buddy here locally who just on Saturdays gets out and does lacrosse for the community, and just like posts on Facebook, says, hey, anybody wants to come to the field and play lacrosse, we're going to be doing drills and skill building and then play some games and coming out. So like there are all these things we can do to keep kids engaged and do those things. Ken and Randy, you're talking about relationships and life skills and community building and fun and peer relationships and friendships. So Randy, you got one more thing. I've got a couple questions.
Yeah, well, just the fact that, and Ken touched on it, but we're now having travel teams. 7-year-olds, 7-year-olds are getting cut from baseball travel teams, and it's just hard to, bring that into perspective at all. And that's what's happened. I mean, and so there's more travel teams now than there were, 28, 25 years ago. And it's really made an impact on recreation sports, where kids can just go play with their neighborhood kids. Geographically, you're going to build a team from this community over here, and that's when youth sports were at its, best. Now, telling kids they're not good enough at 7 and 8 years old is very difficult.
Right. Yeah. And we don't know yet. Right. Right. Like, because a lot of times it's the ones who maybe have matured the fastest. Right. Or, and they're the ones that are making. So the other thing is in the regulations too, it's like you're 3 to 4 practices for every one game. And we've kind of gotten out of whack with that, I think, as well. So that's something I think we can work on. And, those younger ages, it's really around development, right? Developing the skills first, the fundamentals, and then moving to tactics later. So, okay, couple questions. I'm gonna, we're gonna go a little bit longer, but we got to keep moving. So, here's one. Interesting. Randy, this is for you. Is how do high school kids, right? In what can you do within a high school program, right, to better engage, or could engage younger kids in the community in your program? So it's like, how do you involve the younger kids, ages 7 to 12? In with middle school and high school kids more, right? In order to get them the exposure, to get them the mentorship, to get them excited about school and school sport. What do you got some ideas? What are you doing in Streetsboro that way?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's a great point. So our head coaches are very much involved. And we talked about top down. That's not just about the X's and O's and playing the game. It's about inviting them up for youth night to go on the field with our players, things of that nature. If we have team dinners, having the youth come, and certain teams come to a team dinner, but engaging those kids so they feel comfortable and they know who the head coach is. When on a Saturday when they're playing a football game at our middle school, that our head coaches are just hanging out, watching, talking to our coaches and things of that nature. So it's, again, relationship building from the top down, getting to know people in the community, getting that positive vibe going, from the head coach to all the other coaches, and also getting those coaches, youth coaches, involved with our coaching staff at the high school. I think those are some of the ways that we can keep those kids engaged.
Yeah, great points there for the coaches, right? So what are coaches doing at, our high school or more advanced levels to engage with the younger kids coming into the program? I have a great example. It was after a basketball game one night, and it's the end of the basketball game at the high school, and the community's on the floor, everybody's walking around, there's, people are talking, no one's doing anything out unacceptable. There's police officers there, the SROs are there. And the head coach of the basketball team after the loss came out and said, everybody get out of the gym. We don't want you here. And they're little kids and there are people running around. And it was a wonderful community after a loss, hanging out after a high school basketball game. And so, how do we as coaches and athletic directors and invite the community in these positive pro-social ways to continue to build and strengthen the sports system? And how can coaches be the leader in that in their organizations and also in their communities, right? And have more of that social responsibility. Okay, one last question. So this is interesting, and maybe Ken, this might be for you, but what do you feel the landscape for high school players will look like in the future when it comes to recruiting? And Randy, it might be you too, but what is this looking like for recruit? I actually was talking to somebody yesterday about a coach at the collegiate level, or no, it was a high school athlete, and the parent was saying that the recruiting is so different today than it was back then. You know who it was? It was Jeff Quackenbush, AD at Newark, who brought up that. What do you think? What's it going to look like in the future? How people get on to the next level?
I mean, again, Randy, I bet Randy has a much different perspective than I have about this, or at least a much different experience than I have about this. I've heard so much more about the transfer portal and how so many more kids are being ignored, especially in football and basketball. So many guys, so many coaches, because at that level, yes, it is. I mean, if you got a guy who's in a mid-major college basketball program, he's making a very nice amount of money still, and he's got to win. And instead of hitting the gyms on a Tuesday night, and maybe he has a program in Northeast Ohio. I'm not saying anybody in particular. I know a lot of people. Instead of hitting the gyms at a big high school basketball game, he's looking at tape of a kid who's rumored to hit the transfer portal because his agent is texting one of his assistants. And I think that hurts some of the kids coming up, because then it bottlenecks with the transfer portal. I mean, you saw 1,300 kids last week, 1,300 men that hit the transfer portal last week when the college basketball, the NCAA tournament still going on. But it also bottlenecks high school. So you have some of these guys, and it makes it a tougher experience from what I hear, because there's so many kids who, okay, I'll sign on. They might have been Big Ten ready or Big Ten recruits. And they may sign on with a MAC school, and all of a sudden they're playing as a freshman, and nope, got to take them. So now you're becoming a feeder system, and now you don't even want to bother with some of the other ones. So you got to hit the transfer portal again because you have to win. And I think there's so many guys, again, going, what's even the point? What's even the point of doing this? Do I even like it that much? Like, you start to question how much you like it, because then you start to wonder if it's really worth it. So you're answering questions that maybe a guy in his senior year of college would be answering when you're a junior in high school, and that's what makes it difficult.
Yeah, there's a question, Don. It's made a huge impact on recruiting incoming freshmen or seniors in high school, because they're high risk, honestly, right? They've not been away from home. They haven't been away from mom and dad. They may not have played in a real difficult or tough league, but they have the physical attributes to play at a high level. But again, they're high risk when you can go to the transfer portal and you've got a known entity there. You know what this kid can do. You've watched him. He can help your program today. So it's really affected recruiting unfortunately for high school kids.
Yeah, it's and who knows what it will look like, right? So good question, but no answer. Yeah. All right. Well, so listen, let me I'm gonna summarize a little bit, and then I want to share a resource that's coming out here that we're going to launch within Life Sports. But just to kind of summarize, You know, when we talked about these 3 levels of sport today, this developmental, you know, the recreational piece that's so important still that we need to think about how to unpack, and then competitive sport, right? But so developmental, what I loved hearing is like, how do we keep kids playing, right? This, you know, de-emphasize the winning, right? It's got to be about developing skills, right? And learning over time, right? And making it fun. And Ken, your point about like your coach checklist, right? Like, what did I do in practice today to connect? What did I do to retain this kid so he's excited to come back to practice tomorrow? What did I do to improve their skills or their confidence, right? And then, you know, remember, like the #1 reason kids drop out of sports is because it's no longer fun, right? So if it ain't fun at the 5 to 10-year-olds, we aren't going to have anybody playing any sport or being recruited to any place if we don't figure that out. And then when we talked a little bit about competitive, you know, this concept of like return on investment, right? And then the parent, you know, role in this as we've commercialized sport and made it, you know, about private instruction. I think, you know, Randy, you said, and how like, well, what's the return on investment? Well, it's winning. Well, is it really, right? It's, you know, and so how do we focus, as Randy pointed out, the old Nick Saban, you know, focus on the process of it and how we get better and how great it feels as we do accomplish new things. And that can also be a really important piece of it. You know, Randy, 1 to 3% are going to go on and play in college, right? And so there's a lot more than winning and being that, you know, MVP of your team, because all the MVPs don't go on and play in college, right? And so, you know, what else are we doing with sport to develop young people and make sure that they're great people, as Ken said, and then you know, this thing about rec sports, I will say, like, what are the alternative models? Right. And what can we think about, you know, how we reorganize some sport spaces, right? So that we can keep all people in the game much longer, you know, and still enjoying the physical activity, mental health, social development, and all the great things that we know sport brings to us. So, at any rate, with that said, I do want to, before we leave, let everyone know, and Emily, you can pull this up. One of the things that Life Sports and Coach Beyond and OSHA have been doing is, you know, we've been out doing webinars like this, but we also have been doing coach training all across the state. And actually, we just passed our 26,000 Ohio coaches trained in positive youth development and mental health and coaching practices like we're doing today. But one of our deliverables that we just did in partnership with the governor's office and Ohio Moss is we've developed a 30-minute basic developmental sort of youth coaching 101 course. And so right here, if you scan this code, you can get access to this coach training for free online. We've got some star coaches in this training, like Jeff Quack, you know, one of our winningest basketball coaches in the state of Ohio, is in here. Coach Jackie out of Dublin doing the intramural and sort of DYA youth development coaching, and then Coach Joe from our Life Sports and also our middle schools over here in Central Ohio. So have a look at this training. It is free to your youth organizations, to you as parent, volunteer coaches. There's a lot of great stuff in here, 30 minutes. Please take a look and enjoy it. So with that said, we do have an evaluation for today's training. So if you get a chance, please fill out the evaluation. We always like to get your feedback, learn about what other topics you'd like us to be hosting on a webinar, or what other kinds of training needs are out there in the field. So with that said, Randy and Ken, I'm so glad that you were able to join us today, and we can't thank you for your time. We know you're both busy, and there's a lot of great nuggets that you shared today, and we'll be sharing this out through our OSHA newsletter, through our Life Sports and Coach Beyond work, and we'll get it out to the field. So can't thank you enough, and let me know how to return the favor, guys, okay?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, take care. Thanks everyone for coming.